In our previous chapter, we built a solid foundation in understanding statistics, including what is statistics and its classification, definition of some common terms in statistics, different types of variables, and scales of measurements. Today, we move forward into chapter 2, which talks about methods of collection and presentation of data. This chapter is all about how we gather data, where it comes from, how we present them. By the end of this chapter, you will be able to identify the main source of data, describe common methods of data collection, construct tabular presentation of data, and create graphical presentation of data. Stay ahead with me. This second chapter of our course talks about two parts in general. One, about methods of data collection, and second, about methods of data presentation. Let us begin by the first part, which is about methods of data collection. We know that data is the raw material of statistics. So what the question here is, from where we can get them and how can we get them? In doing so, we do have two main sources of data, primary and secondary. What is primary source of data and what is secondary source of data? Where primary data is nothing but the data collected by the researchers themselves through direct interaction, whereas secondary data is the data collected by someone else and made available through sources such as publications, government records, or database. Under primary data, we do have a number of tools to get the data, such as survey methods, observational methods, experimental methods, FGD, sensor data, event-based registration. Whereas, under secondary source, we do have the following examples. We can get secondary source from government publications, NGO, non-government organization, academic journals, medias, online databases, internal organization records. We will see what's the advantage and disadvantage, including the definition of each in what follows. Before that, let us see the classes of primary data collection. We do have three classes. This classification is made based on convenience. It is not based on their characteristics. So, before getting into the process of primary data collection, it is important to note that there are two key activities to be implemented. These are nothing but planning and measuring. Under planning stage, we need to identify the source and elements of the data from which we are going to obtain the data, right? Example, individuals. We need to identify individuals, households, institutions, or other objects or subjects. Second, we need to determine between census and sample survey. Are we interested with census survey or sample survey? If we determine with sample survey, we need to determine the sample size and identify the sampling methods, whether random sampling, stratified, cluster, or systematic sampling is to be used. The third one, we need to decide measurement procedures, structure interviews, rating scales, biometric tools. Then we need to set up organizational structures, such as formulating of enumerator teams, transportation issue, logistics, or field offices. Having said these all things under the stage of planning, what the next step is measuring, meaning that making use of the different appropriate data collection methods, we are now at the stage to begin collecting data. In doing so, we may make use of one or more tools from this class of data collection: survey methods, observational or experimental, FGD, sensors, and event-based. Through these methods, now we are to begin data collection. We are to begin measuring, right? So let us see what's the definition, advantage, and disadvantage of each tools under each class. For example, let's consider survey methods. Under survey methods, we do have these tools. So what does it mean? Personal interview, telephone, online, mail, door-to-door, and their respective advantages and disadvantages. Personal interviews are nothing but one-on-one, and face-to-face structured or semi-structured talks. Through this tool of data collection, rich and deep insights can be obtained because there is high engagement. But what the limitation or key disadvantage of this tool is nothing but it is costly and even it is time consuming. And there is high risk of interviewer bias. There is high risk of interviewer bias. What the second tool under survey methods is telephone interviews. This tool is remote interviews, which is conducted via phone. What the advantage of this tool is cost effective, broad reach, relatively quick, but it is limited depth and it excludes non-phone users. So this tool is available only for those who have phones. So from this you can understand we are excluding those people without phone. So this one is disadvantage of this tool. What the third is online surveys. Online survey is digital questionnaires via web links. It is electronical. It has an advantage of quickness, which is fast, scalable, and it is with low cost. And it allows to make auto data analysis because this is electronical, where after collection through online, there is a system that turns back to tabular form into Excel or SPSS or other related relevant formats so that it allows auto data analysis. But this tool has key disadvantage. This excludes non-internet users, like that of telephone interviewers, which excluded non-phone users. This excludes the non-internet users, right? And there is one bias, which is self-selection bias, right? The first one is mail questionnaires, surveys sent to respondents via postal and return that survey through that postal survey too. It is suitable for recreate populations, but it is slowest turnaround, right? So this introduces low response rate. Was the fused one door-to-door surveys. Enumerators collect data at households in person, right? So high engagement is there, which permits direct observation. But what the disadvantage is labor intensive. Door-to-door survey is labor intensive and it is logistically costly. One second class of data collection methods is observation and experimental methods, which consists of three methods: direct and participant observations, experimental method. Under direct observation, we observe behavior without interacting with participants in natural or controlling setting, right? This is nothing but observation without participants. No interaction here. We only observe in a natural or controlled setting, right? So what the advantage is? High external validity is there and low reactivity is there, right? As we are looking or observing the natural setting. But the disadvantage is limited context, subject to observer bias, what is not such or what is recurrent. With the second tool or method is participant observation. In this course, researchers join the activity or group being studied to gain an insider's perspective, right? As the name indicates, this is participant, where it allows the researcher to get participated on the group being studied, right? In the group being studied, through which we can obtain rich insights, strong contextual understanding, high depths of data. What's the disadvantage is risk of influencing behavior, researcher bias, ethical concerns maybe come across here. While the third one is experimental, which is randomized controlled trials, which is commonly used But experimental can be classified into three: controlled, uncontrolled, or quasi experimentals, right? This experimental data collection method allows strong causal evidence through which high internal validity is there, rigorous evaluation of interventions is there. What the limitation with this experimental data collection method is expensive, and it causes significant ethical concerns with manipulations, complex implementations, right? With this class of data collection methods, focus group discussion, sensor, and event-based methods, other options of getting data. FGD, which is focus group discussion, is nothing but about facilitating small group dialogue to explore perceptions, opinions, attitudes about certain predetermined topics, through which we can obtain rich qualitative insights through interactive format. What the disadvantage here is dominant voices risk scoring results, right? Dominance may be there, so it requires a skilled facilitator to balance these all things. We can obtain data through sensor, meaning use of GPS, fingerprint, eye tracking for precise measurement, through which high precision, objective behavioral data can be obtained. What the disadvantage here is privacy concerns, high cost, high technical infrastructure, right? Event-based registration is all about data captured during service delivery, on training event, vaccination event, on registration event, or on customer queue, and much more. At that event, we can get data through event-based registration method. This tool is real-time tracking tool, high operational relevance, but it misses non-participants, limited contextual depth, meaning that it excludes for those who are not on that event excluded by default. This is also disadvantage. And we have examples of secondary source. Government publications are one possible source of secondary data, specifically data related with census, health, education, and much more. What's the advantage of this data from government publications include they are official, large scale, regular updated, but this data lack local specificity or timeliness because these data are collected once per decade or once per 5 years, right? This data may pass their time or may not appropriate to local issues. Non-governmental organization can also be useful as a source of secondary data from program evaluations, baseline studies, from other assessments. What the advantage of this one is context rich, which is specific but context rich. This focuses on vulnerable groups. Was the disadvantage or limitation? It has varying rigor, limited comparability. From academic journals and books, we can also obtain secondary source. We can obtain data as a secondary source. What are those academic journals and books refers to as peer-reviewed research, theoretical frameworks, right? From this we can obtain data with high credibility, deep analysis, right? But what the limitation here is technical language. This area of data acquisition needs special skills. Low accessibility to non-specialists is there. We can obtain also data from media, news, archives, where it is influenced by potential bias. Online databases can be obtained from World Bank, UN data, DHS, WHO, ILO, or social media. These online databases requires digital access as a limitation and data literacy. And we can obtain data as a secondary source from internal records, from human resource files, financial reports, monitoring and evaluation data. But It calls confidentiality concerns, low external validity because it is internal. Why we use secondary source data in our investigation, we need to consider the following about the objective, compatibility, nature, and bias assessment. When we say objective, it is nothing but to understand the original objective of data collection. Why the data was collected? Does it for policy, academic, or operational use? We need to specify this objective. That helps us to understand where the gap is and to make some sort of arrangements. The other one is compatibility. Ensuring compatibility with your research program based on the age groups, location, definitions used. Nature, what's the nature of the data? Check the nature of data, whether it is categorical, continuous, aggregated, or disaggregated. The other one is bias assessment. We have to check whether there is bias, right, or misreporting. Example, there may be political influence on the course of data collection from the outset, outdated methods, incomplete coverages.